The House will come to order. With no objections, we will revert to reports of standing committees and division. A copy of this order of business has been placed on each member's desk. If there's no objections, reports will be adopted. Hearing no objection, the reports are adopted. Second reading of House files.
Second reading, House File Number 2682.
Second reading. Messages from the Senate.
Message from the Senate, Madam Speaker. I hereby announce the passage by the Senate following Senate file herewith transmitted. Senate File Number 1229. Message assigned Cal R. Ludeman, Secretary of the Senate.
First reading of Senate files.
First reading of Senate File Number 1229, an act relating to insurance. The bill is being referred to the Committee on Ways and Means.
Reports from the Committee on Rules and Legislative Administration.
Report from the Committee on Rules and Legislative Administration. Be it resolved by the House of Representatives of the State of Minnesota that the Chief Clerk is directed to correct and approve the Journal of the House for the last day of the 2019 regular session. Be it further resolved that the Chief Clerk is authorized to include in the Journal for the last day of the 2019 regular session any proceedings, including subsequent proceedings, and any legislative interim committees or commissions created or appointments made to them by legislative action or law.
I call on Representative Winkler to explain the resolution.
Madam Speaker, members, this is a housekeeping resolution to make sure that the Chief Clerk and the desk can handle the work of the House after we leave the regular session.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The motion prevails.
Report from the Committee on Rules and Legislative Administration. Be it resolved by the House of Representatives of the State of Minnesota that it retains the use of parking lots C, D, N, and the State Office Building parking ramp for members and employees of the House of Representatives during the time between the adjournment in 2019 and the convening of the House of Representatives in 2020. The Sergeant at Arms is directed to manage the use of the lots and ramp while the House of Representatives is adjourned. The Controller of the House may continue to deduct from the check of any legislator or legislative employee a sum adequate to cover the exercise of the parking privilege.
The Majority Leader, Representative Winkler.
Madam Speaker, members, this is another housekeeping resolution related to parking. I'd ask for a yes vote.
Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The motion prevails.
Report from the Committee on Rules and Legislative Administration. Be it resolved by the House of Representatives of the State of Minnesota that the time between adjournment in 2019 and the convening of the House of Representatives in 2020, the Chief Clerk and the Chief Sergeant at Arms, under the direction of the Speaker, shall maintain House facilities in the Capitol complex. The House chamber, retiring room, hearing and conference rooms, and offices shall be set up and made ready for legislative use and reserved for the House and its committees. Those rooms may be reserved for use by others that are not in conflict with any use by the House. The House chamber, retiring room, and hearing rooms may be used by the YMCA Youth and Government, Girls State, Young Leaders Organization, and 4-H Leadership Conference.
Representative Winkler.
Madam Speaker, members, third and final housekeeping resolution related to facilities. I'd ask for a yes vote.
Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion prevails.
Yep.
Calendar for the day. The first bill on the calendar for the day is House File 2311. The clerk will report the bill.
House File Number 2311, number 3 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to workers' compensation, the first engrossment.
I recognize the author of the bill, the member from Carleton, Representative Sundin.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. 2311 is the end product of the work of the Workers' Compensation Advisory Council. The Workers' Compensation Advisory Council recommended these amendments to the Workers' Compensation Law to implement a modernized workers' compensation technology system, which will replace an outdated system in effect since 1992. Campus. This is the acronym for the Workers' Compensation Claims Access and Management Platform User System. Will simplify and expedite stakeholder interaction with the workers' compensation system. It will be an integrated electronic and web-based system that will securely maintain and retain records related to the specific workers' compensation claim. Process electronic data filed by stakeholders, provide authorized stakeholders and agency staff secure, efficient, user-friendly online access to documents related to the claim, and support automated workflows and operations.
There are no amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File Number 2311.
Third reading. Discussion to the bill. Representative Albright.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. 2311 is a continuation of the work that was started a couple of years ago between management and labor at the WCAC. This is probably the third out of four steps that will complete the journey to make sure that there is a greater efficiency in the claims process for injured workers. This was anticipated. There are a couple more steps that we need to do to complete the process. There is, as we have talked about in the past, peace in the valley. I would urge a green vote. Thank you.
Further discussion, the member from Anoka, Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And when this bill came to Ways and Means, I did have some questions about some of the data issues and keeping information only on the so that people whose eyes should be on the data would be on the data. And it was very gratifying for the commissioner to come forward and say that they would be working on that in the future. And so what we got on record that day was that they would look at making sure that the system was creating audit trails and that it was role-based access for this very personal information on people's health and an accident at work that caused harm to them. And then also that they would have either annual or semi-annual audits. So I look forward to that coming forward out of the Work Comp Advisory Council, and I know it's a very it's a council that works very hard to find agreement. It doesn't happen overnight, so I look forward to hearing more about that agreement when it does come forward. Thank you, members.
Any further discussion to the bill? Representative Sundin.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This is the best workman's comp bill you're going to see this year.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. The clerk will close the roll. O'Neill votes aye. There being 128 ayes and 0 nays, the bill is passed and its title agreed to. The next bill on the calendar for the day is House File 2822. The clerk will report the bill.
House File Number 2822, number 1 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to capital investment, the first engrossment.
Thank you. I call upon the member from Ramsey, the author of the bill, Representative Hausman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. Members, historically, we have used general obligation bonding for public housing. GO bonds can only be used for public infrastructure. In 2012, Minnesota Housing came to me and said if they could use their own bonding authority to do housing infrastructure bonds, it would allow them to partner with nonprofits like Lutheran Social Service, Catholic Charities, Common Bond, Beacon, Aon, and leverage a lot of private money, because those nonprofits would, if we help in the construction, provide the permanent supportive services that bring people's lives to a better place. And so we did that, and we have had really a wonderful record since then. Appropriation bonds, because housing infrastructure bonds are appropriation bonds, they don't require a supermajority, and so, for example, could be carried in a housing bill. Housing infrastructure bonds, I am told, are the #1 way the state supports housing developments. GO bonds are necessary, but these are necessary because over 95% of the housing in the state is not publicly owned. Since 2012, we have financed through this tool nearly 3,000 homes across the state. And based on early intelligence for this next go-round, we believe the agency will have applications to finance over 2,000 additional homes. We don't have the funding for that. And so obviously the applications will not all be filled. Those opportunities are across the state and include, for example, housing for veterans. In last year's bill, in 2018, we added 3 new eligible uses, and that was affordable senior housing, manufactured home park improvements, and permanent supportive housing for persons with behavioral needs. I'm told by recent Wilder research that the problems of homelessness are growing greater. In the last 3 years, they have increased 9% in the metro area, but they've increased 13% in greater Minnesota. And because we know the senior population is one of those fastest growing, I can imagine that the senior population in greater Minnesota is one of the reasons for that. As we work on these, we always learn from cities across the state. And when we were talking about adding senior housing as an eligible use, some of us worried, well, if we add that, it's just less for everybody else. And then a gentleman from Red Wing, who does public housing there, said to me, he gave me the number of workers who work in Red Wing, but they can't find housing in Red Wing. He said, if we could use housing infrastructure bonds to build senior housing in Red Wing, the seniors could move out of their homes, and those homes would be available for workers to buy. And so it's an interesting way sometimes solving one problem also solves another. But that is the bill before us, members, for this evening.
There are no amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File Number 2822.
Third reading. Discussion to the bill. The member from Meeker, Representative Erdahl.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. Thank Representative Hausman for bringing this forward. Last fall, I had a meeting with economic development coordinators. Actually, it was a meeting not just with me, but with a lot of people from various counties in Litchfield. And one of the important points that came out is in terms of our workforce in Minnesota, there are 2 things that are very important that we are lacking. One is affordable housing, and the other is daycare. It's hard to get people to come and work in greater Minnesota if they don't have any place to live or anyone to help take care of their children. And so that's why it's so important to do this piece of legislation, particularly if you live in greater Minnesota. This is appropriation bonds is how we traditionally fund the infrastructure bonds for housing. And I think the important points raised that this is also for elderly, it's also for veterans. We have a growing number of people in rural Minnesota who can't afford where they live, and we've got to do something about it. And that's why I believe that doing this and in the future doing more is vital to the growth of the workforce in greater Minnesota.
Further discussion to the bill. Any further discussion? Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. All members who desire to vote, please vote. The clerk will close the roll. There being 104 ayes and 26 nays, the bill is passed and its title agreed to. The next bill on the calendar for the day is House File 2821.
House File Number 2821, number 2 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to economic development, the first engrossment.
I call upon the author of the bill, the member from Ramsey, Representative Lesch.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, this bill was the brainchild of the Federal Reserve. After the cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul passed their $15 minimum wage ordinance, the Federal Reserve approached them and said, hey, how about we take a look at all the data and see the impacts on businesses, workers, and consumers. So it is jointly supported by the Federal Reserve, the cities of Minneapolis, St. Paul, and the Minneapolis Chamber of Commerce and the St. Paul Area Chamber of Commerce. The study seeks to evaluate how the minimum wage changes will affect wages earned, hours worked across different types of workers, public benefits received by employed and unemployed workers, firm turnover, pricing decisions of businesses, and the impact on sales, payroll costs, and automation. So what the bill does is it allows the Minnesota Department of Revenue to share tax return data that does not include name, address, social security number, taxpayer identification number, or federal EIN. The staff will create a database. They'll create an algorithm that hides the identity of who the tax returns come from, but it will still allow the Federal Reserve to distinguish between whether it's an individual or a business or something like that. So all the data is going to be hidden, so you can't see who's who. But you'll be able to see what type of filer it comes from, so that the data and the study can be accurate. Once the data is provided to the Federal Reserve, it'll be stored on a secure computer, which is password protected and kept in a secure office. When I read this, I was thinking of Tom Cruise dangling above that computer in the CIA. There's like one room with one computer. I guess that's how they're going to have it over at the Federal Reserve. I've never been in there, but I'm sure that's what it looks like. The microfirm level or individual data obtained for statistical purposes will not be used to identify or make decisions regarding specific businesses or individuals. Members, this bill was vetted. I asked for folks to check in with Representative Scott, Representative Lucero, and Representative O'Neill to make sure that the data was not identifiable to individuals, but that the Federal Reserve, the Chamber of Commerce, and the cities would get the accurate results of a study. This expires in 14 and a half years, and it's only to be used by the Federal Reserve to conduct studies on minimum wage ordinances by municipalities. So with that, I'd ask for your support.
There are no amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File Number 2821.
Third reading. Discussion to the bill. The member from Blue Earth, Representative Munson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and members, and Representative Lesch for bringing this bill forward. It's an interesting bill. This bill really was brought forward by special interest groups who were trying to create a study to show that increasing the minimum wage will actually work to support taxpayers who file with these higher minimum wages. But unfortunately, the tax returns aren't going to give people the information they need to actually support this. But I've written a lot of economic reports, and I can probably show, using a set of data, give the cities the results that they want to see. If you want to know if minimum wage works, go and visit the businesses that are having to pay people higher minimum wages and see how it's impacting their business, and talk to their employees. I don't support taking tax return information from people and using it in studies and then trying to mask the data. And I like the fact that Representative Lucero and Representative Scott tried to water down the data to try to make it protected, and that's a great effort. But sometimes when you water the data down so much, the data is not going to actually mean much. And they're going to come out and present this report to cities who want to increase minimum wages. I think it's a wrong approach. And to do this for 14 years, it's a bad role of government. I think people should be talking to their employees and seeing what the impacts are in their businesses and in the employees themselves to see if this is going to work. I support local control, so I like the idea of Minneapolis being able to experiment, but not taking the tax returns of all Minnesota taxpayers to be used for a study. So I'm going to be voting no today.
The member from Anoka, Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Representative Lesch, for carrying this bill. Yeah, we did have extensive conversations on this with the Federal Reserve Bank and with the folks from Minneapolis and St. Paul to get the language right. It wasn't an easy lift because the Federal Reserve was not used to having to go through a state legislature to get language that was agreeable to everyone. And so I want to reiterate, too, that the Federal Reserve is doing this research at no cost to the state of Minnesota. When the research is completed, they will be destroying the data. There will not be a way to connect the data with people's names, addresses, tax identification numbers. And Representative Munson, I do agree that you can get that information by going and visiting with individual businesses in those respective cities, but that again would come at a cost to our state or the local government. So this is a way to get some really good data without a cost to the state of Minnesota. And I believe that the data provisions in here that are provided for this study are good and secure, and I would encourage a green vote.
The member from Sibley, Representative Grunhagen.
Oh, thank you, Madam Speaker and members. Representative Lesch, I understand why you're bringing this forward. You know, the last time we had state law raising the minimum wage, I believe Majority Leader Winkler carried the bill. He was chief author. He seems to be acknowledging that. And at that time, I shared this report. The Federal Congressional Budget Office did a report at that time, 2014, on raising the minimum wage nationally to $10.10. And what they found, members, that when government mandates minimum wage up to $10.10, 900,000 people in our country would be lifted out of poverty. So mandating the minimum wage to $10.10 would lift 900,000 people out of poverty. But they also found, members, that 500,000 people would lose their jobs, okay? And that's the sad consequence of government mandating the minimum wage. You hurt almost as many people as what you help. Members, the way to raise wages for people is to create a competitive tax and regulatory system. And when we look at the Trump tax cuts, that's exactly what we see. We see wages actually going up across this country. So if we look at the DFL agenda here in the state of Minnesota, raising taxes $12 billion in the next 4 years is not going to help raise wages for the lower income. In fact, we had a tax incident study that said that the DFL tax plan would actually hurt the lower income people in the state of Minnesota. There's a front page article in the Minneapolis Tribune. Members, raising taxes $12 billion, and then even within that to cut nursing homes, which is unrealistic. Okay, evidently I'm doing something right here. Members, we have a 7.3% increase in revenue. That translates into $3 billion of new revenue to spend on government. On top of that, we just had a Minnesota Department Revenue report. We're over $480 million over projections. We don't need a tax increase, okay? And raising taxes at this time on Minnesotans is not going to help increase their wages. And I know when you do that, your conscience bothers you, so you want to mandate it from government. It's a wrong formula. You're going to hurt more people than you help. So please come to your senses. drop the the gas tax, drop the other tax, and we don't need it to extend the sixth tax. We have plenty of money. Last point, I always hear, well, there's inflation. Well, you know, members, the people who pay the taxes also have inflation. And you know, they have to make the tough choices in their budget to make ends meet. So let's show Minnesotan, and especially our citizens and our children, that we can make those, prioritize our spending and live within our means. Thank you, Madam Speaker and members.
The member from Wabasha, Representative Driscowski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, members, Madam Speaker, people from Minnesota, we have a bill before you today. Representative Lesch, thanks for bringing the bill. I wonder how many average Minnesotan taxpayers have asked for this bill. I'd venture the answer is 0.
Excuse me, Representative Driscowski. Members, the volume of the chamber has gotten to be a bit loud. If you're going to have conversations, please take them into the alcoves or into the retiring room. Representative Driscowski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, members, I don't know that there are any Minnesota average taxpayers that have asked for this bill. We have the swamp active here from both the left and the right that wants to prove their point with taxpayer data taken from the taxpayers of Minnesota, and we're assured that it's all going to be safe. Oh, it's going to be secure, and we're going to hide it, and we're going to do these little loop-de-loops so none of the data ever gets away. They won't share these particular items. Well, have there been any data breaches lately, members? Data never gets breached and lost and stolen and used and abused. It does over and over again. So we are bringing forward a bill here sponsored by the swamp on the left and the swamp on the right so that they can each prove their point using the people's data, and the people never asked for it. We shouldn't be intruding in people's lives in order to entertain the swamp. Because members, that's what this bill is. Vote no on this bill. Vote on behalf of your constituents and let the swamp drain itself. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The member from Wright, Representative Lucero.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I've said it last year, I've said it already earlier this year, and I'm going to say it again. Why am I going to say it again? Because it's a fact, it's the indisputable truth, and we all know that. What is the that? That cutting taxes on big businesses, medium-sized businesses, small businesses, increases wages. We saw that with the federal tax cuts at the national level. Immediately upon the passage of the legislation to decrease the taxes on businesses, allowing them to keep more of their own money, we saw announcements of voluntary increases in the minimum wage. We don't need a study, members, to see if mandates by government to increase the minimum wage are good or effective. What we need to do is just look at recent history to know the truth. So what does have a negative impact on employees' wages? Democrat tax increases. And this year, Democrats are seeking to confiscate $12 billion more from hardworking Minnesota taxpayers in a time while we're staring in the face a $1.5 billion projected budget surplus, and we have about $2 billion in budget reserves. Cash in the bank right now that we're sitting on, and that's not enough. Democrats want another $12 billion from taxpayers. So members, we don't need a study. What we need to do is cut taxes to better Minnesotans and raise their minimum wage. Thank you.
Any further discussion to the bill? I call upon the author of the bill, Representative Lesch.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, this is a data bill. And, you know, wingnut Republicans are my favorite Republicans because just like me, they're paranoid, you know. And as my old man told me once, Johnny, just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not out to get you. And he was totally right. But I got to tell you that if it's the Minneapolis Regional Chamber of Commerce that are coming out to get you and the St. Paul Area Chamber of Commerce coming out to get you, you're in more trouble than you think. They support this because they support the data that's going to come out. I think it'll be objective. Whatever data comes out of this study, you're all going to spin it the way you want to anyway. But they want the data, and they want to see what kind of impact. This is a closer look at the impacts of minimum wage ordinances. And those of you who think and are certain, based on anecdotal evidence, that tax cut create more jobs, you got nothing to be afraid of, because this is looking at that. This is looking at it to determine whether it's true or not. So the left, the right, the deep state, the upstate, the downstate, the outstate, they all support this. So please vote green.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. All members who desire to vote, please vote. The clerk will close the roll. There being 116 ayes and 14 nays, the bill is passed and its title agreed to. The next bill on the calendar for the day is Senate File 2081. The clerk will report the bill.
Senate File number 2081, number 4 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to health.
I recognize the author of the bill, the member from Sherburne, Representative Zerwas.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. Members, this bill deals with a slight change to the Administrative Services Unit for the health-related licensing boards to allow a charitable organization that provides clinics or screenings to be able to take coverage for their medical malpractice insurance. Under current law, you need to provide care exclusively to unserved or underserved communities. What this is saying is this is broadening a little bit for these health screenings. This bill was brought to me by the Play for Patrick Foundation. And Patrick Schoonover was a 14-year-old young man who passed away from a previously undiagnosed congenital heart defect. He was playing hockey, and he loved playing hockey. And while playing hockey, he collapsed on the ice, and he had a sudden cardiac arrest and died. They found out afterwards that he had a previously undiagnosed heart defect and that this incident could have been prevented. Members, in Patrick's honor, his family put together the Play for Patrick Foundation to provide free cardiac screenings to any child and family that wanted to as they got to the age for sports. Well, under the state of Minnesota and current law, to qualify for that malpractice coverage through the health licensing boards. Because they offered the service to anybody, they were ineligible for that malpractice coverage. This bill would change that and allow that to continue. This foundation has screened thousands of children and found dozens and dozens of children with previously undiagnosed congenital heart defects and was able to get those children referred to follow-up services and treatment and avoid truly potential disaster. And so that is the gist of the bill, and I ask for your green vote. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
There are no amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, Senate File Number 2081.
Third reading. Discussion. The member from Olmsted, Representative Quam.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. While I was doing grad school and working in Texas, I volunteered with a group that went in to the poorest part of Dallas. Every year they did screenings, vaccinations. It was a great program. And what this bill makes it easier in Minnesota, not just for the wonderful program that was described, but other programs to pop up and for us to better serve and reach out to the communities in our state. So I wholeheartedly support this, and I think it's the way we should go in enabling those that care and wish to do, whether they're volunteers, their companies, etc., to help each other. Thank you.
The member from Olmsted, Representative Liebling.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And members, I just rise to say that I'm a co-author on the bill and I support it. Thank you. We'll appreciate your green vote.
Any further discussion to the bill? Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. The clerk will close the roll. There being 130 ayes and 0 nays, the bill is passed and its title agreed to. Motions and resolutions. Members, there are copies of the non-controversial motions on your desks and online. If there is no objection, we will take action on these motions first. Hearing no objections, the motions prevail. There's a resolution at the desk.
House Concurrent Resolution Number 2, a House Concurrent Resolution relating to adjournment of the House of Representatives and Senate until 2020. Winkler moves that the House Concurrent Resolution Number 2 be now adopted.
I call upon the Majority Leader, Representative Winkler, to explain the resolution.
Madam Speaker, members, this sets the time for reconvening in 2020 as February 11th at 12 noon. I would ask for a yes vote, please.
Any discussion to the resolution, to the motion? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, no. The motion prevails. Announcements. The member from Hennepin, Representative Carlson.
Madam Speaker, just an announcement relative to Ways and Means tomorrow. We do plan on meeting, time and place yet to be determined. In part, it depends on what the House floor schedule is. So watch your emails for when we will be convening tomorrow.
The member from Isanti, Representative Johnson.
Madam Speaker, members, in 1984, Congress passed legislation dedicating the third week of May as National Law Enforcement Memorial Week and to build a memorial in Washington, D.C. Over the past 16 months across this country, we have lost 206 law enforcement officers while performing their duties. In the past 12 months, Minnesota, unfortunately, has added 4 names to that list. We have Corrections Officer Gom, Corrections Officer Parisi, Conservation Officer Wynn, and Border and Customs Officer from Homeland Security, Officer Bacon. This past week, all across the country, has been set aside to remember and honor the officers that left their families to serve and protect and never to return home. We also want to thank the law enforcement officers and the personnel for the work they do every day. They are out serving and protecting not only during the day, but at night, weekends, and holidays. Many of them missing their family gatherings and their children's events. So I just want to say thank you to all of them as well. As you know, we have a memorial located at the south end of the mall, and this past Wednesday, I attended the candlelight service to remember the fallen officers of the state of Minnesota. And it's my hope and prayer that we never add another name to the over 200 names on that list at this time. We have had too many Minnesota officers killed in the line of duty, never since this Minnesota became a state. Madam Speaker, I ask for a moment of silence for the 4 officers that ended their watch in Minnesota this past year.
Members, please rise for a moment of silence to remember the fallen officers of Minnesota. Announcements. The member from Polk, Representative Keel.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I was wondering if I could ask Representative Nelson, Chair Nelson, a question.
He will yield. Representative Keel.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Chair Nelson, do you have any idea when the State Government Conference Committee may be meeting, or are we adjourning for the evening?
The member from Hennepin, Representative Nelson.
As of right now, Senator Kiffmeyer has meetings that's going on. I think she's in finance, and I think we probably will not get back in the meeting tonight.
Representative Keel. Thank you. Further announcements. The Majority Leader, Representative Winkler.
Madam Speaker, I move that when the House adjourns today, it adjourns until 2 p.m. Sunday, May 19, 2019.
Representative Winkler moves that when the House adjourns today, it adjourns until 2 p.m. Sunday, May 19th, 2019. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The motion prevails. Representative Winkler.
Madam Speaker, I move that the House do now adjourn.
Representative Winkler moves that the House do now adjourn. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The motion prevails and the House stands adjourned until 2 p.m. Sunday, May 19th, 2019.